The president is set to meet on Wednesday with top Republicans at the White House to talk infrastructure. Biden is said to be hungry for a bipartisan approach to his plan, a deal that would reportedly involve so-called hard infrastructure on things like roads and bridges and tunnels, likely leaving the rest of the priorities in his spending plans, plural, to be pushed through in a separate bill via reconciliation. That's the grand ambition for Democrats when McCarthy and McConnell arrive for this week's meeting with Joe Biden. Let's keep our fingers crossed that that White House meeting doesn't end up devolving into something like this White House meeting when the last guy was in office. On that infamous day, the minority opposition, in this case Nancy Pelosi, ended up walking away, leaving Trump the great deal maker with egg on his face and making Pelosi forever memeable. This time around, the Democratic president is facing resistance from his left towards his bipartisan tendencies. Over the weekend, in an interview with Axios on HBO, Senator Bernie Sanders told Jonathan Swan he disagreed with breaking up the bill in order to secure GOP votes that may never actually materialize.
Some of your colleagues in the Senate are looking at breaking up this bill into chunks and trying to get Republicans on board. What's your general view of this?
In general, I don't agree with that. Look, the bottom line is the American people want results. So the real issue is, are Republicans serious about doing anything significant in addressing the enormous crises facing this country? During the Obama years, they talked and talked and negotiated and negotiated. They never came aboard. I think Biden has learned that lesson.
So how long is too long?
The Senate is a very slow-moving process. I would begin, starting this work immediately. If Republicans want to come on board seriously, great. If not, we're going to do it alone.
Earlier tonight, I sat down to talk bipartisanship with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, one of the ambassadors for the Biden administration's infrastructure plan. Secretary Pete Buttigieg, thank you so much for joining me on the show this evening. How hopeful are you that a deal on infrastructure, or anything else to be honest, can really be reached with the Republicans in the Senate, with this Republican Senate?
Well, we're going to keep pursuing it, and I'll tell you, there are conversations going on literally every day. It's important to the president to really pursue a bipartisan approach to the extent possible, and we've seen a real proposal come onto the table. Obviously, there's some distance between their proposal and our proposal, but that's how a negotiation begins. And I think with the House and Senate back in session, you're going to be seeing a lot of conversations in the days ahead that we're very hopeful can bring results on what may be the one area of domestic policy where there's a ton of overlap between what both parties want to see, for the simple reason that every Republican member here, just like every Democratic member here, is from somewhere. They come from districts and states that are full of infrastructure needs, from roads and bridges to a lack of broadband,
yes,
to the need to do something about lead pipes and everything in between.
You mentioned the distance between the proposals. Isn't that the worry for some in the Democratic Party and among your voters, that the only reason Republicans come to negotiate on this is to pare it down, is to make it smaller?
Well, let's be clear, we have to do something big this time. There's simply no alternative. We cannot afford not to make bold investments, and that's one of the reasons the president has laid out such a bold vision. Look, by the estimates of my department, we face about $1 trillion backlog just in the work we need to do to get our infrastructure into good shape. So this can't be a time for tinkering around the edges. Now, we hear that there is appetite on both sides of the aisle to do something big. This is going to be obviously a moment that really puts that to the test. And what we know is that an expanded vision of infrastructure is something that the American people want too. We're seeing more growth in the horizons of what counts as infrastructure on the other side of the aisle, at least an openness on internet infrastructure, broadband, and increasingly water. Still more to do, I think, to convince everybody of our case that simply making sure that we have the care infrastructure that we need and other assets is important too. But you know what? We can agree to disagree on whether to call something infrastructure. If it's good public policy, let's just do it.
Yes.
Call it what you like and deliver it to the American people.
The chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, Bernie Sanders, who you know well, a progressive voice on your side of the aisle, he spoke to Jonathan Swan of Axios yesterday, and he made a point about, the focus on bipartisanship. He said, and I quote him, he said, when people got a $1,400 check or $5,600 check for their family, they didn't say, oh, I can't cash this check because it was done without any Republican votes. Secretary Buttigieg, doesn't Senator Sanders have a point? So long as people get the money, the jobs, the trains are there to take them to work, they have affordable childcare, the average American doesn't care if you got Republican votes for a bill, do they?
I think he's right that what people really care about is results, and that's what the president's been focused on. It's one of the reasons why, with the American Rescue Plan, and by the way, let's not overlook what an achievement that was, even though we're now moving on to the next hill. But it's why the American Rescue Plan was so bold, and it's why the American Jobs Plan is the biggest proposed investment in American jobs since World War II. Now, of course, there is also virtue in a bipartisan approach. We think that that's something that would do a lot of good in Washington right now. But what's not an option is just going on with the status quo or doing nothing. And time is of the essence. The president's been clear that we expect to see real progress, and he's looking for real progress to be made by Memorial Day, which is bearing down on us pretty quickly. And so there's a real sense of urgency, and there's a sense that we need to advance the kind of plan that people will feel at home who, as you say, and as Senator Sanders rightly points out, are not following the blow-by-blow of legislative process. They want to know if we're going to make life better for them. That's what they sent us here to do.
So on the one hand, there's this issue of urgency. Can you get it done fast enough, big enough, which we've discussed. There's another issue about bipartisanship and this infrastructure plan. The president is meeting on Wednesday with top House and Senate leaders, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell. Kevin McCarthy, as you know, is a man who has propelled the big lie that Trump won the election. He voted to try and overturn the election. And he's now firing a woman this week from his leadership, Liz Cheney, for denying that big lie. Can you really reach across the aisle if that's who you're dealing with? Is it practical to do that? And even for the sake of infrastructure, is it healthy for democracy to be working with someone like that?
Well, by definition, a negotiation is with people who don't agree with you. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a negotiation. But the reality is that we also have a sense of urgency here and need to get something done. I think the president is committed and is serious about the idea of pursuing bipartisanship. He's also very serious about delivering a big vision for the American people. Our hope is to do both of those things. But at the end of the day, we will be judged for whether we make life better in this country at a moment of incredible peril and incredible opportunity. And I think the boldness that you've seen, as well as the outreach that you've seen from this president, really demonstrate his commitment both to big, meaningful solutions and to engaging anybody who is prepared to come to the table in good faith and give that every opportunity to succeed.
But that's the exact phrase I was about to say, good faith. When Mitch McConnell says openly his number one job is to stop the Biden administration, and when Kevin McCarthy won't even recognize Biden won an election fair and square, where is the good faith with these people? Why waste time?
Well, look, we've seen a proposal put on the table by members of a committee, by the way, a committee that in the last Congress included everybody from someone like John Barrasso, a very conservative member, Wyoming, and Bernie Sanders on the same committee unanimously voting for a package. Now, we're trying to do something different, bigger, bolder, but it demonstrates that there are people in the Senate putting their heads right now trying to get something done. Whether it survives the politics of the moment, well, our job is to make sure that we give that every opportunity to succeed. But our job ultimately, of course, is to deliver.
It is, and you wouldn't have to worry so much about delivery, about getting your jobs and family plans through, if you didn't have to worry about budget reconciliation versus filibuster versus all sorts of different Senate rules. During the Democratic primaries, you and I spoke, and I remember you were very outspoken on constitutional reform, political reform, changing the way we do things in this country, eliminating the filibuster the next time Democrats were in control of the Senate. Now you work for a president who doesn't want to do that. Do you think he can be persuaded to see things as you see them?
Well, again, right now our focus is on actually getting something done, and we're getting something done in the reality that we're in. It's often been said that you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose, but I will say there's a poetic quality to just how historically ambitious and at least by the measure of the first 100 days, historically successful this presidency has been, and I'm honored to be part of an administration that has taken, I think, really responded to this moment where the pragmatic solution and the bold solution turn out to be the same thing.
Yes, and as I said to White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain on this show, I'm the first to say you guys did a lot in the first 100 days, but the rescue plan, which was a huge achievement, was done via reconciliation. You and I both know you can't do the rest of your agenda, your own transport agenda. Everything can't be done through reconciliation, which is why the filibuster debate is never ending. But before we run out of time, I do want to ask you about the jobs report that came out on Friday with a quarter of the jobs numbers that had been expected. Is that weak jobs number an argument for going bigger on the infrastructure plan? Because Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and others, when you unveiled your $2.25 trillion plan, they said, good, but not enough. We need more. And Republicans said, no, we can't go bigger. Does the jobs numbers help you to go bigger?
Well, I think the jobs numbers remind us that this is a good time to be advancing a jobs plan. Although I would also say that what we're trying to do with the American Jobs Plan is not just about some kind of stimulus to get us through the moment or to make sure that next month or next quarter we have good figures. This is about preparing our infrastructure on a generational basis to meet the needs of the American people. This is something that if we get it right, will be remembered in the same vein as historic decisions like the interstate highway system under President Eisenhower, like the establishment of the Transcontinental Railroad a century before that. That's the level that we're talking about with, yes. Again, let me emphasize, the biggest proposal, the biggest jobs investment put forward since World War II. That's why it's so big and so bold, and yes. We think it meets the moment. Now, some folks said when jobs numbers were exceptionally good, well, you know, the problem must be solved. But we have said then, and we say now, that we recognize there is a steep climb, and that's why we're working so hard.
One last quick question, I promise. I know you have to dash. Transport related. TSA officers screened almost 1.7 million passengers on Friday, broke the record, 1.7 million on Sunday, another new pandemic high since 2020, I think, one of the highest numbers in terms of people traveling. But with only 1/3 of the country fully vaccinated, is that something you welcome? Is that a sign of progress, or is that something you're slightly worried about, given airports, TSA staffers have all been at risk of the pandemic?
Well, of course, we welcome the idea of the safe return to travel. As the Transportation Secretary, I'm eager for Americans and frankly for myself to be getting out and about more. Of course, it has to be safe, and that's why we know that our work is not done on vaccinations, even though we're encouraged to hit that halfway point in terms of people being at least partially immunized. And it's why we urge travelers and people considering travel to make sure you spend time, consult the CDC guidelines, and pay attention to what flight attendants and flight crews are saying. We implemented these mask mandates for a reason, right away, as soon as this president took office. And whether you're a bus operator or whether you're a flight crew member trying to make sure you're keeping your passengers and yourself safe, we have your back.
Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, thank you so much for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Mehdi Hasan. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more of the Mehdi Hasan Show by clicking on any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thank you for watching.